All right, okie dokie. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Um, this is going to be a little bit of a different live to what I'm normally used to doing, but I want to do this on an article that I saw on Sky News this afternoon, and I kind of made a video about this on Tuesday last week, talking about the general election cycle and the whole situation with regards to what it's going to take for each of the political parties to fulfill their manifestos or to at least deliver some of what they're promising. And specifically talking about possible tax rises, borrowing cuts, spending cuts, and borrowing more money. And I referenced the IFS in that video. Now, the IFS is the Institute for Fiscal Studies. We'll talk about them a little bit later on. But today, they are on Sky News with commentary around, look, there is a conspiracy of silence right now in regards to what the next government is going to have to do in order to fulfill their manifestos. And it's quite interesting because in election cycles like this, yet again, I feel as though we're not talking about the actual key issues. We're not debating the key issues. This whole thing feels rushed. And I don't know whether that's just me, but that's how it feels. We're supposed to go to the polls literally next Thursday. It's next week. And it feels like it's just rushed, man. It really, really does. So I don't know if I'm going to be any help here. I might have a few pointers to kind of talk about when it comes to personal finance a little bit later on, but I just wanted to gauge how everyone is feeling, really, to be honest. And I do have a poll, um, and this is addressing specifically about the notion that we actually have to go to the polls next Thursday, and it is next week. So I want to know, how are you feeling about the voting next week? Let me know in the polls because I'll be very, very interested to know. But let's jump into the IFS first and foremost, because I think it's good to kind of get a sense of who's making this commentary, because I think there's a lot of distrust still when it comes to the political cycles and political news sources and all that kind of stuff. And naturally, because I feel like people feel disenfranchised and have felt that way for a very, very long time. But this is the Institute for Fiscal Studies. So these are the guys who are in the news today on Sky News talking about this conspiracy of silence, right? So this is what they say about themselves. The Institute for Fiscal Studies is the UK's leading independent economics research institute. Our world-class research helps policymakers and those who hold them accountable understand the impact that policy decisions have on individuals, households, and businesses. So these guys will pretty much take a look at what policies are being suggested and talk and try and figure out whether these things are costed or not, whether they actually have merit, and whether it's possible for the political parties to be able to deliver this based on what we know about the moment and what we know about their manifestos. And this is going to be really, really interesting because Sky News has done like a manifestos type thing, right? And it's very, very good because it kind of highlights each of the manifestos and what they're delivering. And we'll talk a little bit about the article in a second. Actually, let me just go on to that right now. So this is the article. So, general election 2024 conspiracy of silence from Tories and Labour over tax plans in manifestos, think tank IFS says. Now, let's just go to this paragraph right here. Now, the Institute of Fiscal Studies took an aim at what is long described as a conspiracy of silence from both the Conservatives and Labour on how they could meet the challenges they identify, such as reducing NHS waiting lists. Launching its report on the crucial documents, IFS Director Paul Johnson warned that spending on public services would likely need to be cut over the next parliament unless government debt was to rise or taxes increase further. And this is what I talked about in the video last Tuesday. There are only really three options that the government kind of has available to them right now, heading into the next kind of like government. The first is you borrow more money, which means you've got to increase the national debt. The second is you raise taxes, or you introduce spending cuts. Spending cuts I've not heard be talk about that much. Listening to some of the debates and all of the political kind of like commentary that's out there, it's not really been something that has been massively highlighted. Taxes, though, has been a point of conversation. And when we get onto the manifestos in a minute, we know that Labour and the Tories are both saying no increase to income tax. And the IFS actually references that later on in this article as being something where they've kind of tied their hands. So no income tax increase, no national insurance contributions, or no national insurance increase either. And if you watch the video from last Tuesday, the combination of income tax and national insurance contributions represents about 42% of the government's overall revenue when it comes to taxes. They're the largest pots. So what they've basically done is they've said, well, no tax increases for working people. That's problematic because where else are you going to find the money? Each of them have committed to capping corporation tax by 25%. So that's not going to go up. So corporation tax will remain at 25% for majority of the political parties. So if you're not going to tax businesses more via corporation tax, I mean, where's all this money going to come from? Now, I just want to go all the way down here because there's another section here. Well, actually, just let's have a look at this bit here. His rubbish claims that manifestos were fully costed. Now, this is a phrase that we've heard a lot. It's fully costed. We know how we're going to make it work within the existing framework. Well, he's rubbish those claims, arguing the pair faced a stark choice between making taxes rise beyond their manifesto pledges, spending cuts, or increased borrowing. That's the reality. So Mr. Johnson pointed out pressure from a 60-year high in government debt levels at a time of a near record tax burden. So our taxes are the highest they've ever been. We also have debt at the highest it's ever been. So if you remember the whole Liz Truss quasi Quartang budget, within that budget, I actually made a video on the channel, which wasn't very popular at the time, saying that there were some really good things within that budget. However, what she and Kwasi Kwarteng did was they essentially were planning to borrow all this money and not raise taxes. And that led to loss in confidence in the pound and what we eventually found out to be a huge catastrophe in regards to the value of the pound and the onward effect that it had to the economy and everything. So if you borrow more money, typically it stands to reason that if you're borrowing money, you need to obviously raise revenues to do so. But as he's saying here, our debt is already record high. I showed the national debt on the video last Tuesday. It's absolutely huge. It goes up by like £5,000 every single second. It's mad, right? Now you can get into the conversation of, well, who is ever going to pay this back? We probably will never ever pay this back, and that's probably true. But this is how our economies are built. And it's not really sustainable. So we've got high debt, we've got the highest tax burden possible in recorded history at this point in time. And he goes on to say much of the blame for this was a £50 billion a year increase in debt, in interest spending relative to forecasts, he explained. You know, as we borrow more money, it is going to cost us more money. And obviously Russia, Ukraine, cost of living, all that kind of stuff has had an impact alongside Brexit to our economic performance. One of our big problems has always been productivity. That's always been something that we've lagged against other European countries with. And that's one of the key concerns that we have to be able to address with this new government. How do we get the economy going again? Now, I reference Liz Truss's budget back then. She had some really good incentives in there for businesses. You know, talking about exclusion zones where you can businesses are encouraged to invest and actually try and improve employment, that kind of stuff, which in turn helps the economy. Again, at the time, it wasn't very popular an opinion to have, but I thought there was some good stuff in there. So this is what they're facing. Now, it says here, and this is talking about health spending itself. We have rising health spending, a defense budget, which for the first time in decades will likely grow rather than shrink, and the reality of demographic change and the need for transition to net zero. So all of these challenges. So we need to spend more money on the NHS. We've got defense budget that needs to obviously be bolstered because of all of the global conflicts that we currently have at the moment. And people can question, is NATO going to be enough? Maybe, maybe not, but we need to boost our own spending into that. If Trump wins the election in November, then potentially you're going to have to really consider how he's going to approach things with NATO. The fact that the last time he was in office, he was saying, well, you guys aren't pulling your weight. We as Americans are not going to come to your rescue if you're not pulling your weight. So that needs to be increased. Let's not even talk about, what's happening with, our schools, policemen, our public services need more investment. So against all of this and this transition to net zero, which means that effectively there needs to be money invested for us to actually get there, where is all this money come from? coming from? Can we really all just borrow everything? So he's saying that there has to be a combination of a few things happening. And I do want to play this clip right here because he explains it beautifully. And this is Paul Johnson, who's the head of the IFS.
They're not really telling us what they would do going forward. So if you look at the numbers that all of these are based on, they're based on some pretty serious spending cuts over the next 5 years. And they need those cuts in order to get to their self-imposed fiscal rules, which is that debt doesn't rise into the future. Now, they've not told us where those spending cuts will come. And they include in their manifestos some tiny amounts of money, $1 billion or $2 billion for the NHS. That's off a £200 billion budget, which we know will grow by 30, 40 or 50 billion pounds a year over the next few years. They're not telling us anything at all, really, about how they're actually going to increase spending on the NHS. They're not telling us what their priorities are between different areas of spending. And they're not telling us whether they would either cut spending or increase taxes if growth went in the wrong direction.
Wouldn't they argue that this is essentially a wish list that they are setting out, that they cannot actually say how these different monies will be divided up until they know what the fiscal reality is when they come into Parliament and how things change in the next few months?
Well, I don't think we're really asking for, I mean, no one expects anyone to set out precisely what they would do over 5 years, but I think it's reasonable to ask, what will you actually do in an autumn budget in the face of where we are at the moment? Would you cut spending in the way that the current figures suggest that you would? And if you would, which areas would you cut? Or would you raise taxes? And if so, which taxes would you increase? Or would you agree actually to borrow more than you're saying at the moment? Now, it may be that things turn out well. It may be that growth is better than we currently expect. And they should hope for that. But they should also plan for what they would do in other circumstances. And I'm afraid when we put our cross on the ballot paper on Thursday next week, we're not going to know the answer to that. We're not going to know whether we're voting for tax rises or spending cuts. And if we're voting for tax rises, which ones? And if we're voting for spending cuts, which ones? We just don't know where their priorities lie.
And I think there's some really good points in there. I mean, look, spending cuts, we've been here before, so we know what that feels like. They've cut so much already in the last round, which I don't think that there has been investment to kind of give it more fat on the bones to cut now. So with spending cuts, you're going to have to cut even further. But the big question becomes, well, cut from what exactly? We know that there's a lot of wastage, right? Inefficiencies. The government is rife with inefficiencies right now. So I suppose that's an area where they could potentially look to reduce public spending. But beyond that, where does it come from? Where does it come from? And if you can't find enough inefficiencies, you're still going to be left with some kind of black hole in some way, shape, or form that you're going to need to plug. Now, if you're saying in the manifestos, they're either lying or just being intentionally obtuse. So you're saying we're not going to have any income tax rises or national insurance rises. So that's either you're lying or you're being obtuse and intentionally misleading people because they're going to have to break their promises. You cannot say to the public, well, there will be no tax rises, but there is nowhere for you to find the money for all the things that you're promising. So what's going to happen? Well, it's going to be the same cycle. We'll vote next week. Someone will get into power and it will just be a string of broken promises. And they'll say, well, it's because, the situation was worse than we anticipated it to be, which is understandable. And there's no way that you can plan 5 years and your plan from day one is going to remain the same all the way through. You need to be able to flex. You need to be able to kind of have room for error, to be able to maneuver and for things to change. But I feel like, and you guys tell me whether you feel the same, this is what it feels like to me. It feels like to me that they've all kind of like sat there in a room and said, okay, look, what do we need to say to get into power? That's what it feels like. And they know for a fact that people have been squeezed from cost of living. They know that people are feeling financial pressure. So the idea of, well, we can't just raise taxes, that will be really unpopular. Let's promise no tax rises. That will get us into power, surely. And I feel like that's what's happening. I feel like they're saying what they need to say in order for them to get the vote. And then it will just be a slew of broken promises. I'll post this link. Actually, you can go and read it. I would literally really encourage you to go and read this article. It's very, very interesting in terms of some of the things they're saying. I posted it in the chat right there for those of you who are actually with me live. Go read it. What I do want to do though is just, and they've done a beautiful job with this. They've actually gone through all the manifestos for all of the parties as well on Sky News. And I'm just going to go. Let's look at the big ones first. Let's have a look at Tories and Labour, because those are the two main political parties, really. When you have a look at things like their key pledges, right? So this is Labour, Great British Energy, fantastic, great idea. I want to know how you're going to do this. How quickly is it going to be done? VAT on private schools. Vote for 16-year-olds, devolve transportation. So they're trying to privatize that. Great. New border security command, because obviously immigration has been a massive conversation right now. And I still am of the opinion that we're focusing on the wrong things. Yes, immigration is an issue, but it's not as big as an issue as what people are making it out to be. Nationalized railways, and I know that's going to be controversial. That's completely fine. What else are they saying on the economy? Let's go back quickly. Cap corporation tax to 25%. Okay. So again, they're taking out something else that they could increase within a 5-year period. People are going to hold them to this. Minimum wage to account for cost of living with no age limit, no income tax, national insurance, or VAT rises. That's a big commitment. I think when you factor in VAT, and these are numbers from the IFS, and I shared them in a couple of videos, and I think I didn't include VAT in the video last week, but I think inclusive of VAT, so income tax and national insurance contribution is 42%. I think VAT takes it up to something like 52%. That's over half of the income revenue that the government can generate that they've literally just wiped off the table because they're saying they're not going to increase taxes. So you're saying you're not going to, you're out of your entire pie of income, you're saying, right, this 52% right here, this or whatever it equates to, we're not going to touch that. So then you're left with business, so corporation tax, but you said that's going to be capped at 25%. And then stamp duty, business relief. What else is in there? There's probably 6 or 7 other taxes potentially that fit within that category. So you're going to then limit yourself to that small area. I just don't see it. Let's have a look at the Tories on this. This is an important one. I was going to do a video on this, and to be fair, I have recorded the video on this, but I haven't edited it yet. So, Chip or Lock Plus for pensioners. Raise tax-free pension allowance every single year. This is going to be a big problem for people who are currently retired on the state pension, because they're freezing the tax thresholds until 2028. You're going to see pensioners who weren't previously paying tax on their state pension start to pay tax on their state pension in 2027. Again, I've recorded a video which I need to upload at some point, so you guys can have a look at this. I'll try and get it out before next week. 1.6 million well-designed homes in the right places, whatever the hell that means. Well-designed homes in the right places. Like, you could be a little bit more, come on. 2p national insurance cut by April 2027 to a further one. National service for 18, that's gone down like a lead balloon. Invest 36 billion in local roads, rails, buses, 8.3 billion on potholes and road services. Abolish main rate of self-employed national insurance, so getting rid of that altogether. So here we go. Economy will not raise income tax, national insurance contributions, VAT, and corporation tax. So where is all this money coming from? And like literally with all of them, if you go further along on here, you'll start to see their pledges on things like, I wish this thing would allow me to click off without hovering over it. So 2.5 million more NHS dental appointments. So if you're not going to raise the bulk of what is available for you to raise funds via in taxes, if you're going to say we're not going to do that, how are you going to pay for 2.5 million new NHS dental appointments? How are you going to cut NHS managers by 5,500? Okay, cool. That will save a little bit of money, but how much exactly? Is it going to make a dent? Increase NHS spending above inflation every single year. Where's that money going to come from? Recruit 92,000 nurses, 28,000 doctors. All has to be funded. And like we've already said, the guys at IFS are saying these are not fully costed at the moment. So if you're saying you're not going to increase taxes, how are you going to pay for all of this just on the NHS side? Then you have a look at things like, immigration, housing. I'm telling you, mate, there was one that I saw here that really made me laugh. Where was it? I'll see if I can find it. This is Reform's one, by the way. And I'm kind of reticent to give them the airplay on this one because I just don't like the rhetoric that comes out. And bearing in mind, I've sat opposite Nigel Farage as well. Let's not get into it. Anyway, and it's depressing just even having this kind of conversation and just thinking of it this way. So look at the key pledges. Non-essential immigration frozen, that's fine. Let's not go into that rabbit hole. Illegal immigrants detained, deported, fine, perfect. Increase income tax, £20,000. Now, I think that is a very, very good idea. But again, where is it coming from? It's going to cost. I can't remember how much the figure was, but I think it was in the billions. I can't remember whether it was in 90 billion or 9 billion. It's going to cost a lot of money. I think giving an increase to the tax threshold will actually help a lot of people because there's more money in your pocket, which ultimately ends up in the economy circulating. That could help. But the money that you're going to lose in doing so, does it come back via the economy? That we don't know just yet. So it's a good one. Reduce corporation tax to 25%, then 15%. So that is good for business, I guess. But again, it's money that you're discounting that you're not going to receive. So is that going to come back? 25% transferable marriage tax allowance, which is pretty good for married people for sure, 100%. And let's have a look on what was their economy stuff like. Okay, so this is an interesting one. Bank of England stop paying quantitative easing reserve interest to commercial banks. That will take a lot of looking into because I'm not sure that you can actually just say you're not going to pay interest. I don't think you can do that, but who knows? Cut remaining. Look, go and have a look at these. And you can see them for all of the political parties. Now, the only one that I think, oh my God, you're speaking my language, and I kind of alluded to this last week in the video about we're heading for higher taxes, is the Green Party is saying, now where was it? This is the first one. Wealth tax, 1% on assets above 10 million, 2% above 1 billion. Like, all right, you can argue, are those limits too high, especially the 2% of over a billion? But look, we need these kind of policies now. We cannot surely continue with the status quo because it does not freaking work. Someone posted a really brilliant comment on my Instagram a little bit earlier on because I did a reel about this particular thing. Let me see if I can find this comment. And I don't know the guy's background, but it's really, really interesting what he said. If I can find it. What was his name? His name was Lee. Right, bear me 1 second. Let me just find it because it's a brilliant, brilliant comment. And he broke down a few things. Let me see if I can find it. Here he goes. So he was saying here, this is worrying as it deters top earners from coming and encourages top earners to leave. So he's talking about, this whole taxation thing. So in the video last Tuesday, I talked about the fact that I don't want to hear policies that mean that then you have to tax the top 1% of earners who are on £180,000. I don't think that will go far enough, personally speaking, because those guys are already paying a pretty high tax rate. What I want to see is policies that will mean that you have to tax wealthier people who are generating income from assets, from investments that currently have the luxury of using tax loopholes to be able to get out of their tax obligations. And going further than that, actually making sure that you can find some kind of framework where you can tax companies a little bit more and maybe remove some, allowances that they're currently enjoying, or reducing the allowances so that you can get more money from them from a tax point of view. That's what I would really, really, really like to see. So he goes on to say here, and this is an interesting stat, and I probably need to check this out. Public spending by the government was at £12,549 per person for 2022 to 2023. This means to pay for yourself in the UK, you would have to earn £62,793 annually. So that's a multiple in some way, shape, or form. Only 10% of the UK earn this. So to be in the top 10%, I think the number is like £55,000 or something like that. And there are not that many people. So it's crazy to think that to be in the top 10% of earners, you're earning just over 50 grand. Top 10% of earners in the UK, you're just over £50,000. And that's why when you see and speak to people who are earning 50, 60,000 pounds, they don't feel wealthy. The top 10% makes you feel as though you should feel wealthy, you should feel well off. And that is not the case for normal people now. In London, it is stupid to say that £100,000 isn't enough to buy a property if you have a family. It's absolutely crazy. So we cannot continue with this status quo as it currently is, because at the end of the day, you need to find another way to pull money in. You know, I did say in the video where I talked about this income level of £180,000 being the top 1%. The top 1% of earners pay a large chunk of our tax when it comes to income tax and national insurance contributions. It's about 30% roughly, right? So they contribute quite a lot. Those are the top earners. I want to see the wealthy being taxed, as they're suggesting right here. Now, are those limits right? I don't know. I really don't know. But how are they going to do this? There is no meat on the bone. These are all just promises right now where, you know, this is what we're planning to do. Are they actually going to do it? And look, the argument is that it makes the UK less attractive for, you know, the wealthy people who are, most of them, captains of industry, if they haven't inherited their money, who have businesses. Will it deter them? Especially with the rise of, you know, countries like Dubai and Saudi Arabia. And people will laugh at me when you say Dubai, but believe me, they are so pro-business right now, and they have favorable terms, fantastic infrastructure. We're not just competing with ourselves anymore. There is a global market out there that is extremely competitive, and so it's going to be really, really interesting in terms of what's going to happen and how things all pan out. But I do think that this article around the fact that, you know, it's a conspiracy of silence, we're not addressing the right things, I do agree with it, because I don't know, back in the day, and I don't know if I wasn't really paying attention to politics that much back then, you would have a debate on the issues, like a real debate on the issues, and they wouldn't talk over each other and attack each other, not to the point where you've got so much vitriol these days. And I don't know whether this is something that is kind of popular now because Trump did it, so everyone's doing it now, and it's kind of bamboozle people with, you know, the noise. That's what it feels like. Bamboozle people with noise to distract from the real issues. But this isn't how we should be electing governments, right? I mean, please tell me, guys, whether you agree or not. This should not be how we elect our governments, through no real debate, a rush process, and just being dumbfounded with all this fugazi nonsense, issues that aren't really the real issue. I mean, this cannot be the way we continue. It just can't be. And I'm completely honest with you. Voting next Thursday, I have no idea which way I'm voting right now. I have no idea. Part of me just feels like, you know what? I'm going to go for one of the outlying parties. I'll go Lib Dem, or I'd go Green Party, just to stick it to Labour and stick it to the Tories. But then the argument is that a vote wasted? Because are the Lib Dems or the Green Party or any of the outlier parties actually going to pick up enough traction for it to count? It's difficult. It really, really is. And I would love to know, because I do have a couple of other things I want to ask you here. I want to ask you in another poll. So the first poll that I've just ended, let me just share you the results. So I was asking you, how are you feeling about voting next week? 59% of you are indifferent. 28% of you depressed. There's only 12% of you excited. Only 12%. Here's another poll, because I'd love to know how you feel about this. So the question is, are you confident that the next government will improve the economy and living standards in the next 5 years? So this is a simple yes or no answer. Bear me 1 second while I put these in. So I've got to do all of this manually. You can't pre-prep these things on YouTube. So yes, no. Okay, so the question again, are you confident the next government will improve the economy and living standards in the next 5 years? Let's I need to add another option. There we go. What's going on here? 1 second. Sorry, guys. What is this thing doing? Why will it not allow me? Oh, question is too long. All right, let me just edit this down quickly. 1 second. There we go. Will this work now? You know, sometimes things don't want to play ball. This is one of those situations where it does not want to play ball. Let's try this again. Or can you not do multiple polls on YouTube? I'm sure that you could. I don't know what's going on here. Let's try this again. I had a couple other questions as well. There we go. There we go. All right. So let me know what you think. Are you confident the next government will improve the economy and living standards in 5 years? I'm about to take the next out because it wouldn't allow us to have it on there. Okay. I'm not surprised by the early votes that were in there. 100% of people saying no. If I'm honest, I'm not confident of it at all. I think the problem is so big that you need longer than 5 years to do it. And I think the problem is so big that voting someone in for 5 years doesn't give them enough time to be able to do it to any extent of legitimacy. And I just think that we don't have the ideas and, dare I say, the gumption required to do it. I just don't think we do. And it's depressing when you think of it that way. It really, really is. Can things get worse? Can things get worse? Really, can they? I don't know. I hope not. I hope not. I really, really hope not. And the thing that keeps coming back to me is this. I've been relatively successful in my career, so I'm relatively comfortable. If I feel kind of like disillusioned, if I feel a bit bamboozled and be like, oh, you know what, what's the freaking point? Imagine what that feels like for people who are kind of low income. Imagine what it feels like for them. It's horrible. Like, when you think of it that way, and this is the craziest thing, right? And this is why I don't like the whole rhetoric around immigration. And I tried to visualize this. I had this sketch up that I was doing the other day, just thinking about, okay, look, so if you think about the way the world is set up, right? You have us, the people, at the bottom, because we are at the bottom in this equation. Let me just get rid of this share screen, right? You've got us, the people. We're at the bottom of this pyramid, right? And everything's supposed to like flow down from the government for the benefit of the people. But this is the fucked up thing that happens. And forgive my language, but this really has been knocking me for the past 4 or 5 days. And I can't quite visualize this in a way to explain it in a reel or in short form content. So everything's supposed to flow down from the government in aid of the people. But in the middle, you have these elites, right? Actually, I should say above the government, you have the elites, right? And these are captives of industry, corporations, just wealthy freaking individuals, right? Who influence the government to make rules and regulations that benefit them. And via their corporations and their businesses, they exploit the people down at the bottom. And this is where it gets really freaking messed up. It gets messed up because then these corporations at the top, as they influence the government, then filter down information to those people at the bottom, of those of us at the bottom, that it's not their fault. It's not their fault that, they're price gouging or their profit gouging and they're just taking the piss. It's not their fault. I blame the immigrants. They're the ones coming over and taking your jobs. I mean, come on. Are we focusing on the right things here? It really does we're being manipulated. That's what it feels like. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't like thinking in a conspiracy theory way, because I do think we have our own agency. I do think that we have a lot of power collectively and as individuals. And this is kind of maybe where I end this kind of like live, right? We talk about our collective power. You have to go and vote. I've been saying this now for a number of weeks. You got to go vote. And I don't care how you vote. Vote Reform, vote Labour, vote Tory. You've got to vote because you've got to let your voice be heard, right? But I think one of the bigger things is we also have to take agency in terms of our own kind of like personal responsibilities. If things indeed are going to get to the point where we have to have budget cuts, borrow more money, and therefore raise taxes, whew, things are going to get tough. So what are the choices that you have? You 100% need to be responsible when it comes to your own personal finances. You've got to be really responsible. You've really, really, really got to have your head on and know exactly what you're doing. You need to have a plan. You need to have structure. But over and above that, unfortunately, and this is the really messed up bit, right? You're going to have to earn more money. You have to earn more money. And for some people, they may not be in an industry where they can just be like, oh, I'm just going to give him my notice and just put my CV out there and probably get a pay rise and get headhunted. Most people aren't going to be able to do that, which means then you're going to have to set up side hustles. I mean, there's a great channel on YouTube. What this guy does is he goes around and he tests all these side hustles. And I watched one of his videos, and one of the side hustles that he had listed was Uber Eats. Get on a bike or in a car, drive around, deliver Ubers. He did this for 4 hours. 4 hours, 35 quid. Now, I know that 35 quid will make a huge difference to some people, but still, is this what we've come to? Is this now what this is all about? The fact that people are going to have to look at side hustles, develop new side businesses, and that's going to take away from time on things that you enjoy, time with your family, adding additional load and therefore impacting your overall well-being, which ironically means if you are then stressed, depressed, sick, ill, you then go into the NHS and you make that load even heavier. We're just in a system that doesn't freaking work. It just doesn't work anymore. Like, I don't really know how else to articulate this, but I'm sure I can't be the only person who feels like this. I mean, surely, I'm just looking at this poll. I've just ended it now. Are you confident the government will improve the economy and living standards in the next 5 years? 88% of you, no. Only 11% of you, yes. I feel like I've gone on like a bit of a rant and a moan, and this has been kind of like the whole point, the whole sentiment or feeling of this live stream. And I didn't mean it to be so, but it's just really frustrating. Like I said, I have no idea how I'm going to vote next week. And this is the last poll that I want to ask you guys. Actually, there was one other. Let me ask you both because I'm interested to know. So I want to know. I think I might have to shorten this. Bear me 1 second whilst I bring this up. So let's start this poll. 106. Okay. So let's see if I can shorten this really quickly. So the question is, are you worried about the impact spending cuts and tax rises could have on your standard of living and finances? That is the question that I want to ask in this one. And then what I'm going to do is actually, there's quite a lot of you commenting as well. I'll get to the comments as well. I need to shorten this. Let's just shorten it with an abbreviation here. All right, so this is yes, and this is no. All right, there's the poll. Let me know what you think. So are you worried about the impact spending cuts and tax rises could have on your standard of living and your finances? Let me know. In the meantime, let me just have a look and see what comments we have here. So actually, where can I show it? I'm looking at the wrong panel here. Bear me 1 second. Where was it? So Elsie's saying here, legal, not illegal immigration is a far more pressing concern. They say vacancies need filling, yet we've brought in nearly 3 million over 4 years. I would look on the immigration system. We need more competent people in there. And look, this is what they said in the Brexit years, that we would have like a point-based system similar to Australia, that kind of stuff, to really help bolster the workforce. Because the reality is, this is the bit of a concern, is that as we have more kind of like people entering into the retirement phase and we don't have enough people young working, and we know that there's huge job vacancies in the UK right now that nobody's really filling, we need those bodies to do that, to fill those roles. And that in turn means you have more tax coming through, increases revenue, all that kind of stuff. So illegal immigration being the topic of, I guess, outrage, because that's what I've been seeing. I've been seeing so much about illegal immigration. We're not having the honest conversation between immigration's needed, right, in a legal sense. But this is what's happening. This is the requirement. We're not having that broader conversation. It's all focused on there's X amount of people in a boat right now crossing the English Channel. And that's outraging people. And I just don't think that in order for you to have a voting outcome that is based on reason, based on facts, based on, look, what do we actually have to do that you can lead with rage politics? And unfortunately, rage politics is what gets the clicks, because it gets the emotion going, right? Politics too, and most things are driven by emotion. And if you can get emotive, if you can trigger that emotive sense, you're going to get more eyeballs. But people then fail to ask the bigger question. And that's not everyone, but I feel like the bigger question, the bigger conversation is being missed. So I'd agree with you on here, like legal migration is, we need to have some legal migration. And we need a solution to that for sure. Yeah, so Cassie was saying here, I quoted like 30%. I think it's like 40%. It was in a video from a couple of months ago where I talked about the top 1% of earners, and the numbers were out from the IFS. So FSG is saying here, I've been waiting forever to get on the housing ladder, and I feel like the waiting has only made the possibility more impossible. I know how you feel, mate. I mean, a lot of them are now saying, look, we need to build more houses at the end of the day. What we also need to do is, particularly in London, because it's a city, and it's our main city, all of these multi-million pound properties that are just sat there vacant because, a Russian billionaire or whoever it is has just bought it as an investment property vacant. Like, we need to find a solution to that. We do. I mean, property prices are property prices, and the reason why they are that way. But we need some kind of creative situation. I was in New York about a month ago now. New York has the same issue that London has. But what New York is doing that is very, very different is they've identified and said, look, we need an additional 800,000 homes this year. So what the I think is either the mayor or the governor of New York has decided to do is, in New York, there are lots and lots and lots of buildings with basements. And most of the time they're empty. And I'm not saying this is the ideal solution, but this is what they've come up with. So they have basically opened up a scheme where landlords can convert their basements into living quarters, and they will subsidize some of the development. But they're thinking creatively. They're thinking outside the box. They also thought about a scheme where if there was an amount of a lot size on a property, they would pay for mini apartments or accommodations to be built in those spaces. So if you think about New York, it's incredibly dense. So it's an almost impossible kind of like task to say, okay, let's build new houses because it's so expensive. But they're thinking outside of the box. They're looking at, right, what stock do we already have, and what might be a solution to that? I don't see that happening in a place like London. I just don't. And we need to be thinking outside the box. And so I understand what you're saying, FSG, because mate, I was lucky to get on the property ladder when I did. In hindsight now, because if I hadn't, probably would never have got on the property ladder. And there's the whole conversation of, do we put too much onus on owner-owned property, and should you just rent for life? But I've been a financial planner. Most people's biggest asset is their rental property. And when they come to retire, they often rely on releasing equity from that rental property to sustain retirement. It's a really, really precarious equation to try and balance most of the time. But mate, I feel your pain. Elsie's just saying here, competing with Dubai, etc., is simply a race to the bottom. We just undercut until there's nothing left. I would agree with you for sure on that one, mate, for sure. And this is where I think we need to be a little bit bold and brave and confident in what we are and what we've done on the global stage. Countries like Dubai right now, they're not really, they don't have the historic kind of prestige, right? And you could say that that's maybe a pro. They will say that that's a pro for sure, because it means that they don't have, legacy attitudes or systems where they have to adhere to this, or this is what the norm is. They don't have that. They are literally just building something new, and they're planning it out for the future, and they're creating it for the society as it is today. We need to be a little bit more confident on the fact that, hang on a second, we are Britain, we are England, we invented this, we did this, and this, and these are the merits of being here. But who's going to carry forth that message? I thought that was what was going to be happening after Brexit. What's happened with it now? You know, it's mad. The vote just feels like a ticking time bomb to be mad. I wouldn't disagree there. Someone just saying I would vote Green Party, but feel it will be wasted. I'm exactly the same. I would love to vote for Lib Dems or Green Party just to stick it to the big two. But will it be wasted? I have no idea. But then you could say, well, actually, hang on a second. Well, if you did, maybe it gives them the momentum for future elections. I just don't see that happening because we have a two-party system. Who knows? I can see there's a good conversation on here. Someone's just saying here, I'm voting Plaid Cymru here in Wales. Pity they don't stand candidates in England. There are over 600,000 Welsh people living in England. Reform have candidates here, so why not us? I would agree on that one. And then you could have a party you want to vote for, but you can't because they don't run candidates outside your area. Yeah, agree with that as well. I'm just scanning really quickly. Peter. As someone who is unemployed, the job seeker does not want to help. The job seeker does not want to help, and the market is taught. And I just feel no one wants to help a professional who's been made redundant. Got 3 interviews. Yeah, that's hard, mate. I think with things like the job centre, I don't know, mate. There was a stat that I quoted in my book, and it was from the Gallup. And I wrote this down a little bit earlier on, actually, in preparation for a video that I want to record. Right, this is the stat. Apparently, and they did this study, I think it was in 2021. Apparently, 85% of people employed right now in the UK hate their job. 85%. So I extrapolated the book and said, well, actually, hang on a second. If you think that the population of the UK, 67.6 million people, 40% of them are working adults in a workplace, that would mean that you'd have 34 million people who hate their jobs. And I say that because I've noticed that, generally speaking, public services, especially any public service, people just don't care. The customer service has gone down the hill. People just don't care. People don't want to be there. And it kind of feeds into that stat. And it's really frustrating because you need services to work together in order for the experience to be better and for people to be better, right? So job seekers, you need the assistance finding a new job. Like, it will be helpful if you're helpful, because you helping me will mean that I get a job, I start paying taxes, that helps the economy. But because people are so disillusioned and happy, it's like a domino effect. One thing isn't right, it has a massive effect on a whole host of things that we wouldn't necessarily think about from a surface level point of view. It's really interesting, but good luck with the interviews, my friend. Really good luck with the interviews. Whilst the nation of sanctuary, Plaid Cymru actively encourages immigrants to move and work here in much needed sectors. We have an Asian population thanks to retirees coming over from over the border. Yeah. Let me just see the continuation. I agree with you, but no government will close loopholes that benefit themselves. Power is too concentrated, and that right there is the issue, right? You think about all of the... It's the same thing in the States, which is why, this is where you can get into conversations about, is democracy actually a thing? And I think we're seeing more of this in the UK now than we have done in the future. So in the States, how is it that, you say that you're a democracy, but corporations can lobby the government to pass policies that inevitably and inadvertently harm the people? It's kind of that thing that I was describing before. We're down here, government's here, the elites of corporation here, they lobby these guys, and in post the government protecting the people, everyone in the government gets rich because they're shareholders in companies that are lobbying them, and it feels like it's an old boys club where they're little backhanders and gentleman handshakes. It's completely fucked up. Well, forgive my French, but it is. It's just completely messed up. It really, really is. And we cannot continue like this. Like, we just can't. And I know Gary Stevens, he's got a lot of traction over the past kind of like year or so, and it's been great to see. And people like him need to be running for office because people like him see the problem. He needs to be persuaded. I asked him. I was one of the first people where he came onto YouTube channel to do a video with me. This is probably about 2 years ago. You should go watch that video because the conversation we had then is the same that we need to have right now. I said to him, "Are you going to go into politics?" And he was like, "I don't know about that." He needs to, because we need ordinary people in office. And like, I don't necessarily begrudge the politicians for being wealthy. Like Sunak, Rishi gets a lot of stick because he's wealthy, and I'm like, look, well done to you, mate. You made a lot of money. Congratulations. I like to see people win. I like to see successful people because it spurs me on. But it does fundamentally lead to the question of, well, do you really know what it's about for ordinary people? And I think that they do, but they're so far removed because they're used to the comforts and the trappings of wealth. And I think that's just the reality. You don't forget where you come from. You just acclimatize to where you are. And when you acclimatize to where you are, where you came from is so far beyond what you're seeing right now that to a certain extent, it takes someone really special to care. And that's the reality of it all. And I'll never begrudge them for being wealthy or being successful. Fantastic. But it's weird when they get asked questions in the debate, like, would you use a private health insurance if it was the last resort and one of your family members was going to die? I would rather you say yes, because I would. If I had a family member on a deathbed and I couldn't get to the NHS and I had the money and the means to go private medical insurance, like use a private practitioner and pay the bill, I would fucking pay the bill. If you turn around and say, nah, of course I wouldn't, you're just being an idiot. You're being disingenuous. And it's just plain to see. But there's a lot about being relatable, being able to connect to the people. I see why that's important. But at the same time, it's like, you can't force someone to be what they're not. And you can't ask someone to declimatize from where they've gone and where they are currently to come back to where they were at their beginnings. You can't do that. It's impossible. They will always be wealthy. They will always have powerful connections. They will always have powerful friends. That's just the reality of it all. The point is, do you have empathy for where people are? And I think a lot of them, because they want to be politically correct, don't know how to communicate that. But I think someone like Gary, for example, he's made a lot of money. He's a multimillionaire, but he's just a normal dude. Like, even if you meet him, he's just a normal guy. He doesn't flaunt trappings of wealth, trappings of success. He doesn't do any of that stuff. He's just a normal guy. Those are the kind of people that you need in politics. And there aren't enough people. And this is the catch-22 in the fact that because people see what's going on and it looks like a cesspit, ordinary people don't want to get into that cesspit because why bother? I mean, I wouldn't go into politics. Fuck that. I haven't got the appetite for it. I just don't. But yeah, it's interesting. Right. There's so many comments in here. I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for joining this. This was very much impromptu. I wasn't intending this, but I saw the article and thought, let's have a little conversation about this. Look, whichever way you vote, try and make sure that you're comfortable in whatever decision it is that you make. Let me just end this poll right here, see what people are saying. What does this poll say? So, are you worried about the impact of spending cuts and tax rises and the impact they're going to have on your standard of living and finances? 84% of you said yes. Does not surprise me one little bit. We've got to remain optimistic, right? Or at least we'll try to. But please, look, take care of yourselves. Please be responsible. Please just be prepared for the fact that it's going to be tight. And that's just the reality that we're facing right now. And I don't even want to say fingers crossed things will work out, because that's stuff that we can't control. And yeah, it is what it is. But thank you so much for joining me, guys. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you smash the like button. That will be much appreciated. Other people will get to see the live stream who may need to see it and maybe hear some of the stuff that we've spoken about. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Catch you in a bit. Cheers.